Laura Fitzsimmons,
Present.
Kate Thomas,
I'm here.
Joni Easley,
Yep.
Chris June Kiliani, Jeff Wells,
Here.
Susan Bush,
Here.
Angela Cook, Lorena Dellinger,
Here.
Joe Krim,
Here.
Allison Jaffe,
Here.
Harriet Cummings, Jared Hickman,
I'm here.
Justice William Moppin, and Dave Mendiola. I believe we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. All right. I'm looking at the agenda and the next item is public comment.
Oh, Laura, sorry, but we received public comment this morning.
Right, I
In the
read
letter.
it. Is that from the Douglas County Manager?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia.
Okay,
And so that's already part of the record.
correct.
Is the author of that letter on the line and would like to address it or add to the public comment during this period of time? I'm sure we'll discuss that issue later when we go through the monitor's report.
Yes, Jennifer Davidson, Douglas County Manager on the line. I have nothing further to add at this point.
Okay, and thank you for your letter. Okay, is there any additional public comment? Okay, hearing none. Item number 3, the approval of the minutes from the June 14th, 2024 board meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Is that Jeff? Thank you, Jeff.
It is, yep.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, I didn't hear who that was. Kate?
That's me. Yep.
Okay, thank you. There's a second. Okay, anybody want to talk about it? Any corrections? Or we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, is anybody opposed? All right, now on to item 4. Marcy, I'm going to just go through our agenda items in their designated order. Does that make sense to you still?
Yes, the one that I would ask to move up is item 5D. I'm going to ask that you move that before 5A. We do have Daniel Marlowe from Admin Services Department here. So I'm hoping that we can take that more at the top of this meeting so that he is free to move on to other things.
Okay, well, to that end, Marcy, do you want to move item 5 ahead of item 4?
It may be necessary to talk about the concerns of the Davis monitor before we discuss what our budget bill is. So I'd ask that we keep 4 as is, but with 5, we move 5D first.
That makes sense. Okay, item 4, the oversight and the Davis update. I'm sure everyone has the 13th report from our monitor, which is dated August 19th. And I've gotten it, I've reviewed it. I'm assuming most of us have. Marcy, do you want our monitor to speak or would you like to speak?
Well, there's a couple items we wanted to go through prior to getting to the monitor's report because they're all kind of issues that are contained within the report. So it'd give her an opportunity to touch on it when she has that. So I'd ask if I could start with item 4A, which is an update to the board on some approvals from the August 15th Interim Finance Committee. This information is contained in your packet as item 4A, and you can see that our communication issues have really been resolved and we've been able to get many of our items working forward. So we're very appreciative for the governor's office for this and fixing up any issues that we were having. But we requested 3 items at Interim Finance. The first was we requested $2,827,002, and that was to reimburse our rural counties pursuant to the maximum contribution formula. So just like the 2 prior years before, we are reimbursing our rural counties for every dollar that they spend over and above their maximum contribution. To date, this year we've reimbursed $5,000,000 $964,469.95. And this figure does not include those charges which are considered state expenses for counties that have transferred responsibility to the state of Nevada. So we've greatly increased what we're reimbursing our counties, and we're extremely happy that that legislature is standing by the promise that we're reimbursing our counties. So that was request number one. The second request was to continue our items that are required for the Davis stipulated consent judgment.
Taking this bill as is and then working on this through the policy committee to see what that looks like. My
Can you
concern
mute some of those?
I think that's Chris.
Yes,
Is that you?
yes, it is.
So I think.
Can you hear me?
Correct me.
Somebody's talking and it's really cutting in and out, and I'm not sure it is, but they're talking substantively about this issue. So I'm not sure that is Chris, because your voice came over that.
Okay, so I think it looks like Chris was muted. So going back to that, we asked for 3 items to continue our Davis oversight requirements by the stipulated consent judgment. We requested $496,010 to continue our contracts with our 3 oversight individuals who are going through Nevada. We've requested $113,239 of additional training funds. So that's for us to put on our internal annual conference, as well as for us to be able to send attorneys to nationally accepted trainings. And we also requested $76,854. And this is for us to incentivize the collection of data by providing Westlaw continuously for all of our indigent defense providers. And there was no break in service for Westlaw. We provided it the entire time. And we were able to work with the governor's finance office to make sure we're able to do that. And we've also started an online billing portal so that we can collect better data by having indigent defense attorneys submit their billing directly through legal server so that we can capture all the time and also reduce the workload here. So we're very excited to announce that we got those 2 items. And then finally, a request for the state public defender. We requested to transfer funds from personnel to operating so that Patty Cafferata's office could contract with an attorney in White Pine County so that the state of Nevada can meet the workload compliance requirements. So that funding source was approved to be moved. So all 3 of those were approved most recently. And I can take any questions if there are any.
Doesn't sound like there are any, Marcy. Great work.
Yay.
I'm so glad that the IFC, understands what we're doing, what we're required to do, and the hard work you've done to get us to this point. You and your staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And for subsection B, the update and discussion of county oversight, I'd like to turn that over to Peter Handy.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So we've made some changes to how we're performing oversight. We still have the same 3 contractors. They're still doing an excellent job visiting the various courthouses throughout the state. You can see in tab 4B1, we've changed the reporting form so that it's uniform. We had some discussion about this at the last meeting as to whether reporting could be modified. And so our contractors worked with me, and we worked with Professor Anand to kind of develop what's really needed substantively in these oversight visits. So we developed the form. It's 2 pages. There are some things that are kind of circle or select the answers to yes or no, but we provided a lot of open space so that we can really get some details from the attorneys while they're performing this oversight, if those kind of details are necessary. So we're expecting to see a lot more of these in the future. They're being implemented, so we're trying to work out the kinks, if there are any issues. So far, it seems to be going well. These are provided in both like a PDF, fillable, Word, or some of the oversight people are printing them out and just writing them on this. So it seems like they're working out really well so far. As we continue to move forward, we'll see if we need any changes, but right now it seems to be working well. I don't have much to add about oversight other than that. My report's been somewhat delayed on the quarter because we've had a slight delay in getting the reports in, which has been fine with me since I've been handling a lot of the other budget issues the last month as well. So, when it rains, it pours around here. But I anticipate getting that out probably by the end of the month or the beginning of next month to kind of give a review of what's really been happening in counties. And so that Professor Hanan will have a bit more information as the last 3 months, other than the discussions she had and the observations she's had in these various places.
Peter, on that point,
Yeah.
as you complete that, will we be getting copies or will we wait until the next meeting to have it as part of our package?
I can submit it either way. If you'd like to see it beforehand so that you have, if you see any issues you want to raise on a future agenda, I'd be happy to send it out to all of you so that you have a chance to review that and say, hey, I want to hear more about this.
Okay, and that could just be by email, so we're not burning more trees.
Right, yeah.
Okay, does that work for Cynthia and Marcy? Okay, all right,
Laura,
yeah,
hi, it's Allison. I just wanted to ask, make a comment and ask a question. I love this form for lawyers. This is great. Just 2 pages and one you can write in. So I really like the form. And I was wondering though, how does this go into a separate portal so that and who sees it? Is it confidential? Those kind of things.
Sure. So right now, those are going directly to me and the department. So we receive them. They come in typically as an email filled out. They're not going to a particular portal or anything. Essentially, I read through them and then kind of issue spot as I go through. So it's kind of seeing what the repeat issues are, seeing if attorneys have repeated problems. And in a lot of cases, the oversight personnel are really addressing those on their own as they see it or immediately afterwards, which has been fantastic. It means they're doing the work of the department without us having to do any more like additional labor to ensure that that's being corrected. But yeah, ultimately, when I develop these summaries, it's going to be an amalgamation of what's reported on these forms. So I have all the data. I kind of sift through, kind of like Tom did in the previous quarter report, and identify what the major issues are, what the major observations are, if there are any changes from quarter to quarter, those kinds of things in summary.
was that good, Allison? Okay, all right, Peter, keep going.
Sure, I'll keep moving on. So the Q4 data reporting, that's in the packet. If you're interested in reviewing it, it's a lot of data. Our data is getting better all the time. It's also available on our website. It's a lot to go through, but there's some interesting data that can be gleaned from it if you have the time and the ability and the stamina to really get into the numbers and do some analytics. Right now, we're trying to do some analysis of the data that we're getting in, which you can see kind of in the next discussion point. I don't know if you want to roll into that or just, but basically, yeah, I'm just here to announce that Q4 data is in. There's a lot of it, and we're seeing some valuable insights.
Okay, and you're going to tell us what the valuable insights are next?
I am, yeah. If you go to the next item, we're doing some selected data analysis, and that's Nye County, Carson City, and Elko County. And we kind of pick these counties because there's some interesting disparities and updates in the data that's happening in those counties. So we've done some look into Nye County's reporting, and there's clearly something going on in Nye County if you just look at the quarterly numbers, right? They have a huge number of cases. They had a lot of caseload. Some attorneys were reporting a lot of hours in their cases. And I think that's fairly consistent. So what we did is we kind of identified where we thought these issues were. It turns out they had a lot of open cases older than 90 days. So they've been open for longer than 90 days. In legal server without a closure, many of them without any update in status or any addition of time. So Stanley pulled that data. We kind of worked with David Sheik, and he went visited all the attorneys in Nye County and worked with them to say, hey, look, guys, I know you guys are worked, you're very busy, like you have this backlog of data though, and we really need to clear it out to kind of see where you really are and get an idea of how we can best help you. So in the last month and a half now, there have been a reprieve program going on there where we've rotated the contract attorneys off their cases. They're not receiving nearly as many cases they typically would, and those are going to selected counsel. And it's given them an opportunity to really evaluate and modify their data in legal server. So a couple of attorneys that have contracts, Alexis Decker reduced her open cases by almost 600 cases, much closely more likely to reflect her actual caseload than what she looked like she was carrying based on the evaluation.
Can I be like,
yeah.
did she, in terms of like, for example, that attorney, I understand during that period of time, she wasn't getting new cases because she had to look at basically her paperwork and bring it up to speed. Was she still getting paid or is she paid hourly? So she didn't get paid during that time?
No, they're still getting paid under their contracts during that time.
Okay, so
Yeah.
really, I
No
hate,
loss in wages for them. It was just a reduction in new workload.
okay, well, all right. How many, like, for example, in Nye County, the contract, the attorneys you're dealing with that have this backlog, are there any that have no staff at all?
In Nye County, I believe there are 2 attorneys that don't have staff. And it, again, I would think it would be challenging based on the value of those contracts to employ staff at reasonable rates in that geographic location. So,
If the only income coming into the lawyer was the contract.
right.
Okay, understood. I don't know. I just as an aside, there's got to be some way that this doesn't repeat. Financially.
Madam Chair?
Yes, oh, yes, Joni. Ms. Easley?
Yes, thank you. May I ask a question?
Of course.
I actually have 2 questions. The first is it possible that these public defenders, that these cases are closed, but they're not reviewing and they're not removing them from their caseload management system or their reporting system? And then my second question is, if the number is erroneously high, would it stop new cases from being assigned to them? And I'm not saying there's any monkey business going on. I'm just curious about those 2 things.
Yeah, so the first point, the answer is yes, right? So a lot of those cases that were open in legal server had actually been closed. They've been completed. A judgment of conviction or an acquittal has already happened in those cases. And the attorney just hadn't gone back and cleaned up the data. And again, like, I think we can't prove a causal a causal factor between these 2 things of workload and data and timekeeping, but there is a strong correlation between, hey, we've given you a reduction in new cases and they've found significant amount of time to remove these cases as open cases in legal server. And I think that's something, like I said, notable in the data that a couple of attorneys have removed. I think Kelly Blatnick had 100 cases closed in the last month and a half that were previously listed as open. Alexis Decker had something like 600. Another attorney had almost 100 cases closed, maybe 70 something. I have to look at the data again to get an exact answer. But yeah, those 3 attorneys have made significant strides in that amount of time to close cases that were actually closed, but still remain open in the reporting software.
Madam Chair, may I ask a follow-up question?
Of course, always.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. My follow-up question would be as to whether or not there would be any value, at least in this case, and who knows, maybe in more cases, in working with the district attorney to ask for their statistical information regarding the number of cases that have been closed that were assigned to public defenders on a monthly or quarterly basis.
So it probably depends. I don't think it's likely that the DA's offices will track or have a running record of which cases they have opened for which public defenders have been assigned. I know several of the courts, most of the courts to my knowledge, don't even keep track of that themselves, especially since we've taken over selection of counsel in these cases. So a court might have a list of open cases that it has on its dockets, but it won't be able to tell you which of those are indigent defense cases versus, pro se cases or privately retained attorney cases. So could there be some value in reaching out to DA's offices and getting what data they have? There could be. I won't say as a blanket it's not going to be useful, but I think there's a low likelihood and it would be a significant investment of time to kind of sift through all of that information and determine on, first instance as to whether it's going to be valuable or not. I think ideally, right, we get better compliance from the attorneys that are working these cases to input their records in the legal server, and that we have our oversight personnel conduct these audits. So we're looking at trying to do this more frequently than once per year or something for each of these places, but really identifying where it looks like workloads are high, getting the data from the system, and then working with our oversight professionals to work with the attorneys to identify, is there a reporting problem? Is it a caseload problem? Is there something else happening that we can get fixed?
And Chair, may I add something?
Yes.
We did email a form, I believe it was yesterday, and it was entitled Nye County Updated Workload After 60-Day Reprieve. So it is boxes that are showing how many cases were open as of 6/30/2024 and how many cases are open as of today. And we are seeing a reduction in some of the workload. And we do have to thank David Sheik for a lot of his hard work on this, because he's been meeting with the attorneys and working with this. And I don't know if David wants to pop on, but he had printed out a list of cases that I believe were over 200 days old, that were opened over 200 days ago and were not touched. And part of the issue is, as we consistently have changes in who has the contract in Nye County, those attorneys get all that prior attorneys' cases forwarded to them. So they may not know that those should have been closed. And as Peter said, we continuously are getting better and better data. So what our priority is at this point is providing them of notices of these cases have been open for more than 90 days. They haven't been touched. Should they be closed? And I think that's part of the reason that Alexis Decker was able to close about 500 cases, because those were ones that were old and they just kept transferring forward. So we're trying to get better data as we move forward. And that's really what we're focusing in on. But I think you see that the attorneys that have responded to David, you're seeing significant workload where we're getting an accurate picture of how many attorneys they represent. So when Nye County enters into the additional contracts, as we move workload to those new attorneys, we'll be able to make this more even moving forward. So David, I don't know if you had anything added all to that, but I just wanted to make sure that you saw this and, you know, the hard work of David going through and reaching out to the attorneys, we really appreciate.
David, do you have
And
any?
David, thank you. Thank you for your answers. I appreciate it.
David, do you want to add anything?
I have nothing to add to what Marcy said. I'll answer any questions that anybody has about what we've done in the county.
I think I have a question as of someone who for years, a long time ago, was a contract indigent defender with no office staff. I understand. I'm not suggesting anybody's doing anything wrong at all, any of these attorneys, because they're not. But it's just, you know, you have a limited amount of time and energy. Where do you put it? I'm not sure you necessarily put it to going back and closing a bunch of cases that you inherited. I'm wondering if we can, but it also the problem with that not happening, I understand you guys are doing a lot of things, and thank you, all of you, to make sure that, you know, if we get an accurate number and moving forward, we're working with accurate numbers. But I'm wondering if you could suggest a contract clause or something. I mean, you know, something so that people know part of their duties are to provide accurate numbers. And in order to do that, they've got to start pruning the old cases off, or anything else you think would be important, any other way to get to this. It's understandable, but we need to make sure we fix it.
I'm not sure there was a question there.
No, it wasn't a question unless, well, there kind of was hidden in there.
You know,
Do you think it would make any difference if the contract said that?
I think the contract provides they're to keep their data up to date in legal server, and they're also to prepare annual reports. But when I talk with the attorneys, it's like, well, would you like me to spend more time working on my clients' cases or doing all this paperwork on closing cases? And so they're balancing their time. Giving them the 60-day reprieve, it really helped them to focus on sitting down and looking at what they had. And the attorneys that don't have staff, it's harder for them to go in. We still have a couple of attorneys I need to work with to get more numbers so we have a correct caseload.
Okay, so you think this is getting resolved?
We are moving in the right direction.
Okay, all right. Can we put this maybe like in 2 or 3 agendas back on?
You could,
Okay.
you could put it on, you could put it on the next agenda. I think we'll have substantial compliance by the next agenda.
Okay, all right, whatever you guys want. Thank you. Okay, sorry, Peter.
No, no problem. I think I just briefly add, like, I can't think of a contract that doesn't require that kind of clause, that doesn't have that kind of clause in it. All, if not, almost all, if not all of the contracts do say that the attorneys will meet with the requirements of the regulations of the board, that they'll provide their data and legal server as required by regulation. And the counties have been including these in their contracts. So I don't want to, it doesn't seem like anyone is stating if they have a contract, they don't need to do it. It's just because of the way, the system's set up, the counties are the contractors with these individuals. So really it's on them to kind of enforce these provisions of the contracts, if at all. Our tools aren't as, they may be too heavy-handed in some cases of not reporting. So we're trying to incentivize the reporting through things like Westlaw, through these kind of reprieves to really give them the time to sit down and focus on it.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll briefly get to a couple of the other data analysis. You should have tabs from all the data is kind of broken down. We're talking about workload data in the packet. I think this is in 4C maybe. It's one of these very long. It's 4B2. I can't really read this handwriting. Sorry. 4B2. And so in Carson City, it's interesting. The public defender is doing a lot of work. Based on the workload study, they're doing more workload than they have the capacity to do. What we're not seeing in the reporting is as much work being done by the contract conflict counsel. So we're kind of starting to dive into why that might be. Various reasons could come into play, like if the public defender's office isn't conflicting off of as many cases, conflict counsel is not going to get more. They're not going to be able to put in as much time. But we have had running issues with one of the contractors just not putting in sufficient time at all. And we've had conversations with the city about, like, this isn't really a tenable situation moving forward, where we need to be able to see that these attorneys are doing work for them to be eligible for reimbursement, right? I think I used the analogy at some point during the meeting of, like, you don't pay somebody to build a fence and then have a partially built fence and then expect them to retain all of that payment, right? So if they're not being utilized, they need to amend the contracts to reflect their actual utilization because the main office isn't conflicting off of cases. If they are being utilized and they really are working these cases, then they need to really have that reflected in legal servers so that we can see that they're actually providing that work. Because otherwise we're left in a spot where we have questions like this, and then I have to talk to John Cadlick and say, hey, John, you go talk to these attorneys and kind of find out what the issue is. And so since we've taken back the partial, part of the selection of counsel for Carson City, we haven't seen that many cases come through for selection of outside counsel. They're still maintaining their rotation inside. So if it comes out of the Carson City Public Defender's office, that then goes to one of the conflict counsel secretaries, and she divvies it up in rotation between the existing conflict counsel. I think if we continue to see the kind of numbers we're seeing for the conflict counsel, that might be something that we rescind in the future, because we really need to know why the data looks like it is. And that seems to be a tool where we can get more information the best way possible, absent, actually auditing people's time. And it's really difficult, really time consuming to, see what an attorney is doing every day, how many hours they're actually putting in, other than those obviously visible days where they're in court or something. So just a brief update on that. For Elko, we've seen a significant decrease in reporting from the Elko Public Defender's Office. I think we've discussed this before. It's principally due to their transition to a different system. They haven't been using legal servers since they fully transitioned to that. There's been some perfunctory use, but the reporting really isn't as robust as we can get through the data that we receive in legal server. And it is creating an issue where we can't, it makes it difficult to identify if they're meeting with those kind of workload standards that we already have. We can see significant amounts of reporting from the attorneys that are taking selected cases. So we put, I think for a while, it was an average of 50 cases a month. It might be similar to that still to appointed counsel outside of the public defender's office. They do a great job for their clients. We're getting really good reviews on almost all of them. But we do have this continuing issue of a lack of reporting from the public defender's office. So it's hard for us to get an idea of the total number of cases, how many attorneys are really needed. I have no doubt that Matt Pennell's office is doing a lot of work just because the number of cases are conflicting off of. But it's hard to verify how, if it's really way too much work or just a little too much work, or maybe they're conflicting appropriately and they have a reasonable amount of work. It's, again, without that data, it makes it really difficult to ascertain. And Derek Lopez, one of our other oversight personnel, has been going out. I think he's actually just got back or just finished his trip. And I haven't had a time to read his reporting. It just came into me, I think, this afternoon. So again, once I have a chance to read through that data, I'll be including that information in my summary as it gets to you. Any other questions based on all of that rambling?
Madam Chair, I just have one question, and it just relates to hiring additional counsel for those counties that have been determined to be deficient. What is the progress on that? And I'm sure I can ask Lorena about that for Nye County, but what about the other counties? Are they moving towards engaging additional counsel?
And
Marcy, is that something you're going to address later?
yes, I'm going to address that later if you can.
Okay,
on
that's
that.
fine. Okay, thank you. I'll wait. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's it for me for the 4B item 3. I don't know if Marcy wanted to cover item 4 or.
Yeah, so regarding item 4, just receiving advice and recommendations from the board on how we should proceed with this. And it could be maybe a discussion after we have the 13th monitor's report. Because as the monitor claims in her report, in a lot of these cases, the county is the one that's making a lot of these decisions. But ultimately, whether or not there's compliance in the monitor's mind does fall to the state. So we're kind of limited in what we're able to do and what steps. So these are concerns that we're bringing to you is, Carson City, they're paying their contractors $125,000 plus a year, which comes to $31,000 a quarter. And one of the contractors only reported 27.5 hours in a quarter. So they're technically paying that contractor more than $1,000 an hour if that's appropriate. I guess maybe this is a discussion after our Davis report, but these are questions of, do we have ideas on how the board would like us to proceed? Should we have a workshop to create additional regulations to see if we can tighten some of these requirements by regulations? And some concerns that the monitor will bring up are, should we have a minimum payment for a contract? Should we have a contract term require that they have to say how many hours are expected, which, is required at this point in the contracts, and what the hourly rate is? Should we change our hourly rate so it's scaled based on experience and the complexity of the case? Because there's been recommendations that maybe those more complex cases with more experience should be paid a higher rate than the lower areas. So these are some questions. Another one is, updating our qualification requirements for conditional approvals of whether that is allowed for a person to work with another individual conditionally as long as they're receiving mentoring. And like you said, should we be more clear with our contract terms to require them to comply with the data, which there already is a regulation that requires that. So I don't know if we could have a discussion on recommendations and advice of what you'd like to see moving forward. But these are some issues that we're having in the lack of reporting with Elko, the lack of reporting with some contractors, which is also an issue in Nye. And, like we said, these are not our contracts. So any advice would be greatly appreciated.
Well, if I can just take that preliminary, I don't have any advice, but just like I hate to back down to the historical perspective. But the state, because I was on committees, a lot of us have been on committees, that gave rise to DIDs. The state undertook, and you've just explained, like for IFC, massive infusions of significant funds to the indigent defense function in the rural counties throughout this state. The state also recognized through our study committees and in the enabling legislation that it's the state that's on the line if, God forbid, an innocent person receives ineffective assistance of counsel and ends up convicted or incarcerated. In that context, I understand that the counties have a big role in this, and we appreciate the work the counties have done. But in that context, you know, if the state's paying for everything over what the counties paid back in the day, every single dime, and if we're on the hook, if there's, you know, a huge miscarriage of justice, I think, you know, and I don't have specifics, but, you know, if we have, I hate to be them, because after I did all the indigent defense, you know, I became a kind of a contract lawyer. I don't know that we need regulations, Marcy. We may specifically, but I'm hearing most of the stuff is in the contracts. And I think we have to, and I don't want to be punitive. It's hard work these people are doing, but I think we need, you know, there's no financial incentive to close 600. And I don't want to use that, you know, I don't want to use that individual person, but you know, if this is a business. I mean, it's a calling, but it's also a business. And if people on the county level, on our level, or on the individual defender level aren't treating it like this is state money, this is money that everybody has to really, you know, be a guardian of. So if we want a workshop, fine. If you see specific regulations that you see a problem and you think, damn, we don't have an existing regulation, yeah, then I guess we have a workshop. But it kind of, maybe on the next agenda, you could suggest any area that you think that we've just heard in item 4 or in Professor Hanan's report, anything that wouldn't just get fixed if we can have meaningful agreements with the county and Elko County Public Defender. You know, just, it kind of seems like we're tiptoeing around here. I mean, is that unfair? Because I don't, you know, you guys are on the street with this, but.
And I would say, you know, part of our issue is that there's limited things at this point, unless this is a bill draft request, that we can really do. We can do a corrective action plan.
Right.
And we can explore having the Nevada State Public Defender move into Elko. But the reality is, with salaries for the state public defender, we can't fill those positions. The other options we can have are to work with them to bring them into compliance. And, you know, it's been kind of presented that maybe we should do a corrective action plan that extends 2 years. And if at the end of the biennium, they're not in compliance, then we transfer them to the state. So this could be a slow task that we start to undertake. But yeah, there's some counties, you know, and I think the monitor could report to it, you know, at the end of the day, the department doesn't have the ability to make the decision in these counties. And one prime example that's going to be an issue is Humboldt County. You know, the alternate public defender left the position several months ago. They have a contract with 2 contractors that are supposed to represent full-time attorneys. They've given their notice that they intend to stop taking cases. I believe at the beginning of September, they'll stop. And we expect Matt Sturmitz might be leaving his position as the public defender. That leaves them with no public defenders to be there, yet the department doesn't have anyone that can fill in. Patty Caffrad at the State Public Defender's Office doesn't have any extra staff that she can send over there, and she has no financial ability to be able to enter into contracts for individuals to cover Humboldt County. So this is really going to, you know, Eve's discussion of what's needed in our budget so that we can act promptly. And the reality is we're reactive because we have to create the corrective action, and then we have to request funding from the contingency fund. So these are kind of some of our limitations.
Madam Chair, can I speak for a minute?
Of course, Susan.
Thanks. Just a couple of thoughts. I think if the counties aren't ensuring they're getting proper reporting, then the state should withhold the funds. Elko, we pay almost what is it, 1.3 or 1.6 million the state pays? And if we're paying that money, we need to make sure what we're paying for, what services. And if their reporting isn't justifying us paying that additional funds, I don't think it's abnormal for a business or a state to question the bill, right? Why are we paying for this? You're claiming we need an additional $1 million, but your numbers aren't justifying it. Then I don't think it's unheard of to withhold that payment until they justify it or send the supporting documentation. Because the reporting of the numbers in the cases is the documentation to support why we're paying this additional funds. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense to me.
And in Clark County, if I'm not getting my reporting, my contract attorneys don't get paid. And they're all very good about, if I have a question about bill, redoing the bill, resubmitting it, or providing additional information. They report the numbers each month. If I have questions about your numbers are off, they'll correct it. But if I just pay them, they're not gonna, take the time to correct it. So it has to be, you submit your billing properly and I pay you. And I think with any contract, it's a business, you submit the billing properly, then you get paid. And that's really the only way to ensure we have some type of control of what bills we're paying.
Laura, can I add something?
Absolutely, Jeff.
All right, Susan, were you done? I'm sorry.
I am Jeff.
Okay. Can you hear me, Laura?
Yeah, I think we all can. We're all nodding.
Okay. Well, there's really two issues that I think got related here in that same discussion by Marcy. One's the one that Susan just talked about, which is when we are paying the counties, there's a statute that says that we are allowed to audit the amount that we pay. I doubt that person really was getting $1,000 an hour. I think they just only, didn't fill out the data. But if we use our software as the audit tool, then we would pay based on what we can audit. And so instead of 1.3 million, maybe it's only 600,000 because there's no data in there. That would put some incentive on the county to enforce their county contracts so that they would get the data. One topic. Second topic, Marcy talked about maybe doing some legislative change. The legislature sets now the DA's salary, the commissioner's salary, clerk's salary, and the counties and that sort of thing. Why couldn't we ask for a bill that allows the state public defender within a range, not even a fixed number, a range in order to get the job done, these kind of salaries for public defenders and contract public defenders in various counties when we need to in order to comply? And it's not unheard of. We have a county salary structure set by the legislature. We would just put it in that same section, but you just can't put $1 amount because Humboldt County may require a different amount than Esmeralda County, than Douglas, et cetera. But just an idea, and I just popped in my head, but an idea of a type of a bill draft.
Marcy, Allison? Because I think, I hadn't thought of that either, Jeff. I certainly want to make sure we talk about that. But Allison, what are your thoughts?
I think, we're talking about several counties, but most of the counties are doing well and doing better all the time. So I think we need to address the counties that are doing, great things and really working with us and give them the kudos that they need and should get. At the same time, it seems to me like in some counties there are specific lawyers who are not performing as they need to under the contract. And in other counties, it's the entire county that is not performing in the way that we're expecting them to. And so I agree with you, Laura, that I don't think we need overarching kind of, new rules and regulations. I think that we need to look at ways to attack the certain counties, because I think each of the counties has different issues. And sometimes, you know, if there's one person that's not performing, a lot of times, you know, corrective action has been taken again and again and again. It hasn't worked. So I think money is the next issue. And, you know, most lawyers would snap too. I think if it's, okay, well, I just get a certain amount of money no matter what I do. I think we can, you know, brainstorm and come up with some ways that we can approach it without being thrown out of the counties totally, which is, you know, especially I think in a couple of counties, they don't want us at all.
Well,
that was kind of circular, sorry.
No, I think following on that and following on what Jeff said, I hadn't thought of this, and I was unaware of the fact that some county positions are set by state statute. That's what you're saying, right, Jeff? And why couldn't we then put county public defender, state public defender, a range in there? I mean, the bottom line, you know, we have these very important issues that you're all dealing with, but there's just not enough money. That's why the state public defender can't hire people. That's why we can't get somebody out in Winnemucca. You know, it's just, why would you do that if you can be in Washoe County and make a living wage, you know, doing the same kind of work? So money is underneath all of this. I don't know, you know, a bill draft request, we are getting real late to be making bill draft requests, right? And so that issue I would like, and I don't know if that's something our AG can help, you know, just anyhow, I think is, unless just kind of to move on, we're not making motions or anything because this isn't agendized, but Marcy and your staff, do you see that, you know, look at the statutes that Jeff talked about, look in the chapter and see how, if we could add something that just ensured, since the state's paying for this and is liable if there's a problem, maybe the state should set these wages rather than I think that's wonderful. And then to the rest of what Allison brought up, you know, we've reimbursed, I mean, Marcy, it seems to me from all the work you and your staff have done, even non-performing counties are getting reimbursed. But they're not reporting to us they're not, as Susan said, they're not providing us the information. This may work to our advantage, that it's the counties in the first instance that pays the defenders. I'm not sure if they're not in compliance, that we have an obligation to reimburse the counties then 100%. And, you know, I know we want good working relationships, but that's a two-way street, in my opinion. So I'm going to mute myself, everybody else, and you don't have to ask my permission to talk. Just if anybody wants to weigh in on this, go ahead and do it.
And just Chair, would it be helpful if maybe moving forward, we send a letter to the counties, letting them know that we will be auditing and that their maximum could be reduced? Because, you know, part of our main concern is we know that these rural communities do not have enough attorneys right now. And a lot of them have expressed that it's stressful for them to be keeping this time. So what we're really working on, as we all know, is getting enough attorneys to handle the workload. And I think once, you know, we hit that, which is next year, then we can start to expect counties to be complying because they'll have enough attorneys. So would it be appropriate if we prepare a letter to that effect saying we will be auditing in the future and this is going to be our matrix for doing so?
This is Chris. Can I ask a question to Marcy's last point?
Of course, Chris, always.
Thank you. I kind of like that idea. You're putting them on notice, but I do think if you're going to put something in a letter, not only do you audit, but that if you find that they have to repay, they have to repay within a time frame. Don't leave it too open-ended then if that's the case. And I do like the idea of the state setting a minimum. I think it gets the counties out of it. We have to be reasonable, so that should be discussed, but there should be, it's the reason they can't hire in the first place. So we have to acknowledge that. And if there's some augmentation that comes in funding wise, then we look at that. But if the counties aren't doing what needs to be done to attract the public defenders, then maybe the state needs to step in. Thank you.
This is Allison again. And if I agree with sending a letter, but I also think on the flip side, you know, we need to, you know, go ahead and acknowledge and, you know, say in a letter signed by all of us that, you know, they've been doing a great job. And we appreciate that they're working so hard with us, and, you know, maybe enumerate the things that are getting done, even though we have more to go. And I think that, you know, hopefully that will help, you know, compliance from the positive avenue too.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, Marcy, how do you view the next steps? We haven't given you any guidance, really. But
So I think what my plan is for our next meeting is I'm going to prepare a letter letting the counties know how much we reimburse the past couple of years to each of the counties. So it's clear to the county commissioners, we have reimbursed this amount. And then I think we should provide them a notice saying that moving forward, as we're bringing, like what Allison said, that we appreciate all of their hard work, because our counties have been working very hard to become into compliance. And these are independent contractors in the end. So I think that's part of the struggle that the counties are even having. But we could put them on notice in the letter that, you know, moving forward as directed by the board, concerns could be audited. And, you know, so we can prepare a letter for the board to review at the next meeting to see if it has the language this board feels is appropriate. If you feel that would be a good step.
I don't hear anybody disagreeing. I would ask in that letter that you put that, you know, we have this kind of, you know, we've been working, you've been working, you know, group hug, but moving forward, we're the stewards of this money and of the obligation. And, you know, we can't reimburse you for, you know, in excess of your maximum contribution to the extent we're not getting the information we need from you to know that money's going to the right way. I mean, it kind of dovetails in, you know, if somebody is, I'm sure they're not, but if somebody's getting $1,000 an hour, that's money the state's paying that could go to some lawyer to increase what they're getting. I mean, it's all an organic whole. But I still want to get back to Jeff's point, a bill draft request setting a range for rural counties with a population of X, Y, and Z. I just think that would, because if that's added in, I know we have problems with IFC and all that, but if it's in statute, it's got to be in the budget, doesn't it?
So Peter, did you want to discuss on the equal defense request and the unclassification, a little bit of what we've submitted?
Sure. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So we have developed, I think we discussed it before, like a BDO that really would bring state salaries and other salaries across the state in line. So there's some parity between the public defenders, the contractors, and the prosecutors in those counties, right? Because we still see a disparity, and it's for various reasons. And it varies by county, and it varies by the defense structure they've chosen. As for, I guess I'll start with putting things in statute, right? So a lot of the district attorneys in rural counties the elected district attorneys get paid less than some of their employees because it is set by statute and it doesn't get increased regularly by the legislature. Sometimes there's like a 3 or 5 year, you know, it'll increase by X amount, but then doesn't get revisited until it becomes a big issue. So, I mean, from my perspective, I'll just give you this briefly. I don't want to like hijack Jeff's idea. But I think the more discretion we can give to this board to kind of set those things rather than giving to the legislature, which only meets every other year, and we can get a little bit more discretionary funding in the budget to reimburse these types of expenses as counties come into compliance with these kind of numbers, might be a more flexible way of addressing it so that we don't have this kind of rigid structure. And the second part is the answer to your question is somewhat no. the state doesn't have to build all the things that it has to, under the statute, they say they're going to pay. They don't have to put that in a budget for it to get paid. And sometimes that happens where the legislature says somebody's going to get this amount in pay and, oh no, there's no funding. So almost anything that's going to happen in that realm is going to have a little addendum that says if sufficient funding is provided. And I think that's one of the difficulties that we're facing all the time. And I think the counties face these difficulties too when they're doing their own budgets is, well, you have to pay your district attorney this much money, but also you need to hire all these other employees who are getting paid a lot more because you can't hire at the rate the district attorney elected is getting paid. And so we don't necessarily want it. We want parity, but we don't want parity in a place that's not going to attract good, qualified, competent counsel to these positions, if that makes sense. And I think with the equal defense kind of proposal we're putting forward, it should create parity that that it provides parity in each geographic location. So, and not just necessarily with the elected DA. So it should provide that contractors, based on the hourly rate they're getting from the county, have the equivalent when we consider things like overhead, staff, those kind of costs that the DA's office has. And we did that report, I think it was Stovall Solutions a year or two ago now, where we got that number, and it came out to about $170, I think, an hour for these contractors to be on par with, I think, an average number of DA's offices that he looked at. So it's actually good that we're coming up with that number, and that number is likely to change over time with all the external factors you'd expect, inflation, the economy, things like that. So I think having, again, that flexibility with this board or something instead of it just being rigidly in statute might be something that's more amenable for us. And with this legislation that we're kind of looking at producing, it creates a more robust system for defense attorneys to get really pay that is on par with prosecutors on average in those different counties. I probably went way too long on this one kind of thing, but
No, I don't think you did. I think I'm not aware. I mean, I know we had the study done, and I know Marcy sent us all the graphs on pay parity, and I've been in meetings where she's addressed it, but when is it going to happen? I mean, what's the vehicle to get those funds, guaranteed and sent to the people who need to get paid more to do this work? Is this session, or how's it happening?
So we're doing a few things. So I think it's probably going to be addressed later when we talk about budget, but all of the things that we've received from the 518 Section 7 funds by way of Interim Finance Committee is going to be built as M units in our budget requests, which are mandatory components. They would get built into our base budget for the following biennium. So all of those funds.
Isn't that happening now? Aren't we getting our budget request in?
Yes, that is happening now. So that is what we're actively building for the next biennium would include. So it's a significant amount of funds. Like Marcy said, we got huge amounts, 2.3 million in addition to reimburse the counties for this first fiscal year of the biennium. That will be built into the base budget for the following biennium. As to the equity part, it depends on the county right now. Some counties are paying $172 an hour on an hourly basis to contractors. So they really are getting that that par value based on that the Stovall Solution study and the current rate set by the board for appointed counsel built into what they're receiving. So they are getting paid at least an equivalent amount to maintain staff and office, those other kinds of things for overhead, so they can have some equivalence. And again, in other counties, it really is that flat, and here's a number of hours, and you can kind of come up with a different hourly rate based on that is lower than that rate set by the board for appointed counsel.
Well, just based on recent things, I mean, I don't know. Okay, my concern is the state public defender, the county public defender's offices. They're handling the most clients, and okay, I'll be quiet.
So, Laura, I would like to address Peter's comments. Flexibility for this board is nice, and he's correct. Sometimes in these statutes for the DA commissioners, you pick all the different county positions that the legislature puts a salary in for. Sometimes it does go a period of time before it gets raised again, that the legislature doesn't always address it every year. The disagreement I have with this comment is it's not a state funding at that point. It is a state legislature that tells the county what they are going to pay the DA and the commissioners. And so
Right.
because of that, it doesn't get unfunded by the state. If we can get it in there for what we're paying the public defenders, it's now the obligation of the county to pay it, and we would address it back on the back end through reimbursement.
This is Chris. Echo it, correct.
Okay, I think that's really important. I'd like to see, and I think the people that are nodding their heads affirmatively, I'd like to see something where that's in some bill draft. I mean, I don't know how that works but I think, we need to get that done and we need to get it at least considered this next session. That these rates are set, the counties will have to pay it and then we'll reimburse them. But and then you can go to IFC. Professor Hanan, I read your report, and obviously the continuing going to IFC is not ideal either. But meanwhile, they're people that need lawyers in counties where they can't get a lawyer. And one thing, my understanding, at least one of our rural counties, is still the members of the county commission in a certain county don't understand when they're setting budgets for their public defender that's not, that they're going to get reimbursed. I mean, it's just kind of a knee jerk. They see the money, but they don't understand they're going to get it back. And so they're way too cheap when they're setting these salaries. Sorry, I'm muting again. I guess I can't mute because are we done with item 4 and we're going to go to 5D? Is that right?
Madam Chair, may I offer one thing? And it's concerning sending the letter to the counties. I was a county commissioner for 12 years and dealt with these issues of funding indigent defense. And then I was on the other side as a member of county staff when I was the assistant county manager after I left office and still dealt with those issues. But all during that time, I was a member of this commission. And I understand both sides. And I was thinking while we were talking how I would feel if I was either the comptroller of a county or a district attorney or some other staffer who was looking at this letter, and would I perceive it as a threat to my funding? And I probably would. I would advocate, if there's going to be a workshop, we need to have some kind of a big confab so representatives of all of these rural counties can come together and talk about what they perceive as problems with this entire structure. Because I've talked to several of them, and what I'm hearing consistently is that, yes, we know that the states, or that DIDS says, and we believe DIDS, that there will be money to pay over and above what the contracts are. But that's not to say that at some point in the future, the legislature won't pull the rug out from everyone and all of a sudden the funding won't be there. So I think until we are able to sit down and talk with representatives of each of these counties and find out specifically what their fears and or misunderstandings are, I wouldn't support sending a letter to anyone.
Okay, Joni, thanks for explaining that to us, because you've actually been on the ground with this, a lot more.
Since I testified before the Supreme Court about the caseload standards, and was rewarded for, like I always said, no good deed goes unpunished, was rewarded with an appointment to this commission and have been on here ever since.
Okay.
Joni, that was me too. I testified at that same hearing. It was like,
yeah, we were there. Yes, yeah. I remember that.
And we both got put on this, or the
yes, we did.
Okay, I think that's really important, Joni. I think that I'd like to continue this. I mean, they've got to get their budget in. That's the thing. That's bill draft requests and budgets. They're pretty much hard hard deadlines that Marcy and her staff are working on. I'm not sure even that this needs to be on the next agenda. We have, let me look, meetings, blah, blah. Maybe even February, although we'll have other. I don't know. I don't want to burden you guys. I think everything that's been said is really good. But I just keep thinking, like, when you tell me that Matt Sturmitz might quit and we're not going to have any indigent defenders in Humboldt, and there's no way the state public defender can staff that. Maybe if we just concentrate on getting the funding and maybe concentrate on getting a statutory range set for each county, if that works. Any others, you know, I'm just kind of leaving it to you, unfortunately, Marcy, but you've been taking good notes on all these comments.
And Chair, I would just point out that in the last legislative session, I think what we did, what we like to call as belts and suspenders for the maximum contribution formula. And we've told all of the rural communities, we now have belts and suspenders, because as you remember, the maximum contribution historically was regulation and it was not funded. So when we go to the counties, they'd say, you don't even have money in your budget. How are you going to comply with that? Well, that changed this biennium. We had $3.5 million. In our budget for each year. We had about, was it $15 million set aside for the restricted statutory contingency funds and Assembly Bill 518 for us to go to if that money ran out. And we also had Assembly Bill 454 that said, and the maximum contribution was put into statute. It said that it's paid for out of that money given to our department. And if the money given to our department is not sufficient, that we can go to the statutory contingency account and it must be paid. So we have the law there. We addressed it in the last session. We've shared it with county leadership, but there's still
resistance.
Concern.
Marcy, they don't trust the state. They don't trust the state legislature. And that is what I'm hearing the problem is. They don't trust the state legislature.
This is Chris. Besides that, or in addition to that, Joni, not to dismiss it, you're probably right on. But is the point that we're discussing now is whether or not to put in statute a minimum for salaries that county government has to pay. It's like when they do finally raise the county commissioners and the sheriff and the DA and whatever, every once in a while, it's 10 years apart, 5 years apart, whatever. Most of them only work part-time and except in the rurals. And so what you're trying to do is that, or are we getting hung up on what wording should go in the letter?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yeah, sorry, wait, yes.
You're taking notes or something.
No, I'm not. I'm reading an email. I'm sorry, Patty. Go ahead, sorry.
Patty Kefrada. You know, what I hear is a lot of distrust between the counties and the state. And I wonder if the organization has ever reached out to NACO and gotten on their agenda and made some contacts with all the counties. And, you know, they're all unique. You know, they've all got different challenges and budgets. But I just wonder if it wouldn't make sense to meet with them. And I'm not saying who from this organization, but would meet with them and go through what it is we're trying to do, what our concerns are, what we're mandated to do. You know, and the salary game is, well, the state sets a salary for anything, and then some county, usually Clark, raises that salary. And so all the highway patrol troopers leave the state and go to work for Clark County. You know, it's a never-ending battle of, and, you know.
Hey, Patty.
Yes, Jody.
Patty, you know what I would do? There's a NACO conference coming up in September. I would be it's probably too late. Well, yeah, it probably is too late, but I was going to say the optimal thing to do would be to have a breakout session that talks about the indigent defense function through DIDS. Because you wouldn't just get county commissioners there, you would also be getting members of county staff there. Everybody goes to the NACO conferences.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense to me, and some of my other positions, I've had programs to NACO, depending on what my
Who's
job
that?
was.
That's following up on that. Don't we have a NACO representative on this board? It used to
Me.
be Dave, right?
We have 4.
Yeah, I am.
So let's
Yeah.
hear from them because they should be able, I don't know that it's too late. I mean, if people want to be informed.
I think the program has already been printed, but I can call and find out. I can sure call and find out very easily.
Joni, they're not under the open meeting law, so they could do a supplemental agenda or whatever and see.
No. I mean the program for the NACO conference.
Right, that's what I'm talking
And
about.
every slot may have already been filled, is what I'm saying. But I will call because I think that is the best opportunity to get the people you want to talk to all in the room at the same time. And additionally, there are going to be new commissioners who will be in that room.
Okay, so Joni, you're going to call and find out if they can squeeze us in.
Yeah.
And then you're going to report back to Marcy. And if for whatever reason that.
I'm going to report back before the end of this meeting.
That's okay, great. And then if not, we can do it in a Zoom call. I mean, if they want, this is an easy thing. I will tell you, I know for a fact that Marcy and her staff have had meetings with every single person in every single county that has been involved with this, but you're saying there are new commissioners coming on, whatever. Let's get this fixed because I think that at this point, Marcy and her staff have tried every single way to address this. If this is just this grudging distrust of the state, we all know this in our current political climate. There's some people you just can't reason with. But, if we need to be there as commissioners or whatever, let's get this put to bed because this is just dragging us down.
I have to say, Madam Chair, Laura, that the people I've talked to, they have no problem with Marcy whatsoever. They trust Marcy. It's the state they don't trust.
But I don't know how, okay, I think we need to move on this meeting. I mean, these are all.
The horse is dead.
Yeah, no, it's just, and I'm not, I wanted everybody on this board, I want to hear what they have to say, but we had somebody who's leaving. I think we moved to 5D, Marcy, right?
Chair, we do need to touch the monitor's report. I know that she's got a couple main concerns. Some things that I would like to point out before she talks about her report are her 2 main concerns are insufficient budget to ensure ongoing compliance. She notes all the great things that we've been doing, but she's concerned about actually getting Davis closed until there's a way we can show that this is sustainable funding that's going to be built into the future that we don't have to continuously fight for. She's also concerned about the insufficient number of attorneys. And Joni did ask about where we're at with the workload as of today. And we did send out a table showing Nevada rural workload assessment attorney need for Davis only. We've heard that Douglas County, in that letter, they said they likely will be entering into their last contract. So we expect Douglas County to be fully compliant with the workload in time. And that leaves us a shortage of Churchill, which the monitor does address her concerns in the report of approximately 4.6 attorneys. I'd like to point out that, Churchill County is making huge changes. Brenda and I had the opportunity to go to Fallon. We visited the public defender and alternate public defender's offices. And Jacob has several empty offices that he's posted to be able to fill. So we're working with the county of what changes we can make to be able to fill those offices. But as they point out, a year to build an office and to staff an office and to set the salaries, these counties have made such huge steps, and we appreciate that fully and totally. But we're still working with Churchill to see if we could possibly enter into contracts or something, so that we can have coverage by the time that the workload needs to be completed. The other shortage we're seeing is in Lyon County of about 2.2 attorneys. We are in constant talks with Josh Foley and many of his contractors. So we're trying to creatively think of solutions of how we can get there by November 2nd, or yes, November 2nd. And then finally, Nye County, I've reached out to Lorena to see where we're at. My understanding is they're going to be releasing a notice of availability of contracts, and we're hoping that they can add 6 contracts. So right now we have that shortage of those Davis attorneys of approximately 12.8 full-time attorneys in our rural communities. But that goes back to that first problem of where are the attorneys to be able to cover it? I think it's that whole squeezing the balloon that we can take one from one county to cover another county. And I don't know if that's necessarily the solution to this issue. So with that, I wanted to point out that there is that workload so you can see what the monitor is discussing, but I'd turn it over to the monitor.
Thank you, Marcy. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I wanted to clarify this question that I address about financial disincentives because I think it's tied to the workload issue, although it is a freestanding issue. So I wish I had more solutions for all of you, but really my job is to look at this consent judgment and say, where are we? Is this compliant and isn't this? So first with regard to workload, I agree with what Marcy is saying, except that the way that Douglas County is addressing the need for attorneys, where I believe it was, I had it up here a second ago, 8 attorneys that they needed or total, is by saying that the attorneys will work up to 2,200 hours, that they commit to working up to 2,200 hours, which is significantly more than the full-time employment amount of 1,392 hours. It's person's free to work as many hours as they want over full-time. And, most attorneys work more than full-time, absolutely. But the problem is that the language in the judgment really talks about financial disincentives when the contract amount is set at 265 and the person could be assigned cases that cause them to work up to 2,200 hours. And it doesn't really require more than one attorney. It doesn't require a staff person. Those contracts, they're doing that. They're probably taking private cases as well. And there's a real risk that they're not complying, that it's not for them to comply with the judgment, but the state's not complying with the judgment because this is the kind of financial disincentive that the consent judgment is talking about in terms of, putting somebody in a position where they're going to not have sufficient time or funds to do the work they need to do on their cases. So it does intersect with workload, but it's a separate issue too. And a similar issue in Lyon County, they have 2.2 attorneys. That's the shortage. If they in fact have 3 full-time attorneys on all 3 contracts for 3 full-time attorneys, and I wasn't able to confirm that. I don't think that that's been confirmed. And it raises the problem too. Again, the amount for that is $480,000 for 3 attorneys and 2 staff people. Likely that they're going to have to take private cases in order to make ends meet. And then we run into a problem of, we don't really have any way of knowing whether the private workload reporting is accurate. And about half of attorneys don't report private workload. We don't know if it's because they're not taking private cases or they're not reporting it. So I think these contracts are ultimately not going to be, I don't think they're compliant with what the judgment is talking about. And the judgment talks about a reasonable hourly rate. And this board has done a great job. They've, got a statute now and we've set an hourly rate for appointed counsel. So there's probably multiple solutions, and I'm of course not, I don't have to follow my ideas for solutions, but there has to be compliance with the judgment. But one question is whether or not it's an hourly rate situation. You could contract to say you agree to provide full time, but that it's always got to be an hourly rate, and it's the rate that's set by the board. And that would, remove or dispel the problems of financial disincentives and put the state in the clear. There's probably other ways to do it, but just moving to an hourly rate, the way that I believe that Clark County does, Susan, maybe you can confirm that they're not like contracts flat, like you take all the cases in this court. I'm not sure, but the hourly rate, and then people do report their hours because they're paid at an hourly rate. So that's one way that that could work. But again, that's a suggestion. My main point is to bring up this, this language about financial disincentives and the prohibition against it, which the state agreed to in the judgment. Okay, let me see. So I think when we talked about this, Churchill County, they are, they've had an open job posting. And when I talked to the public defender there and the alternate public defender, it's been a couple weeks now, but they didn't have any applicants with JDs or lawyers who had applied. It's 88,000 and some change. It's probably too low. So how does that change? It sounds like that's what the board is really thinking about here. How do you set it? They've got beautiful offices, and it seems like it's, it's an hour from Reno, as you all know, and it seems like it would be attractive to some people if the rate were set right, if the salary were set right. That's a guess on my part, but compliance with the workload has to occur by November 2nd, and my next report is November 15th. So a lot of what I was trying to do in this report is just to kind of set the issues out there so that you could consider it and decide how, or the legislature, whoever wants to consider this, can look at this problem and say, where are we going to be if we need 12 plus lawyers? And if we've got some people contracting for way more than full time, plus private casework to make ends meet, are we going to be in compliance when that date, workload standard compliance date comes around? And then the other point was just to really say, a message there, like, I don't know how you say the lawsuit's been completely complied with, the judgment's been complied with, if Marcy and her team have to go to the IFC on an ad hoc basis for every little compliance activity, and to do things like pay the oversight attorneys who are such a huge part of this judgment. It seems like I think it's normal for the legislature to take baby steps towards funding and budgeting for a new agency, but these things seem like they've been in place for a few years, and it's time to consider what is a permanent or a lasting agency that does this sort of work look like, and what budget does it need? So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, I just want to thank you. I read the report. I'm just so grateful to you for everything that you've done. I'm seeing from the report, is there a downside? I mean, maybe everybody chimes in, but Professor Hanan, hourly rate seems like it solves a lot of problems. Are you nodding your head, or am I wrong? Is there a downside that we see to just requiring an hourly rate in all contracts and not a flat rate, and make it a fair hourly rate? Does anybody have any concerns about that? I mean, Susan, that's what you're dealing with, right?
No, we have a mix out here. We have contracts plus we have hourly, so it's mixed depending on the type of cases. So we have attorneys assigned to certain courtrooms. I have I'm going to take my dependency, probably somewhere around 60 attorneys that we pay monthly on a contract rate to take cases to their assigned departments. But we do kind of monitor their caseloads. They average maybe 12 cases a month. But if it's a complex case where it's a life sentence, then they get paid hourly. And then if it's a complex non-life sentence case, like multiple robberies or something like that, they could apply, and then I pay them hourly, depending if it's complex. So it's kind of like a hybrid system. But
Okay.
those attorneys that do that work, like to know they get a set of, they could budget every month. I get a set amount of money under the
How
contract.
much is that money? More than we're paying, I'm pretty sure, right?
No,
Your flat hourlies?
Well, we pay
Your flat
lower.
contracts?
We just went up to 130 an hour. So we're lower than the state. But we provide the amount of work we are able to give our attorneys is a lot. My budget's extremely high, like
Robust.
15 million that we are giving out to the private attorneys to do work.
But then for the ones that have the contracts where they're flat rate, where they're assigned to the courtroom, what are they getting per month?
The criminal adult attorneys get 5,500 a month.
Okay.
And they could range from, some of them get 3, 4 cases a month to 12. Those include misdemeanors. There's extras built in for appeals, for jury trials. And then of course they can always apply for additional if they get a lot of cases.
Okay. All right. But for our purposes, I mean, is anybody, Marcy, what do you think? It's just an hourly rate everywhere.
Many of the counties are turning to an hourly rate where it clearly states so that, you know, we say what's expected, the expected number of hours, but if they go over the rate that they can bill. And I think Mineral County just entered into a contract where they're paying $200 an hour in 2 of their contracts, but the time must be reported. So that's helpful to the department because we can ensure that the time is being accurately reported, and it incentivizes the attorney to fully use our system so that we have full and accurate data as we go forward, and we can really get that better view of what workloads are. So we are encouraging counties to do that so we can clearly show compliance with the workload, but we still have other counties that haven't done that as of yet. So I think that'd be helpful.
Well, can we just say they have to?
I think that'd be a regulation, going to a regulation talking about contracts to clearly specify the hourly rate. Peter, would you agree on that it'd need to be a regulation?
My best guess would be it probably does. It may require a statutory change because we are really interfering with the county's ability to contract. It wouldn't be a contract from us. That makes sense. So I don't know. We have to ask a legal expert that does this all the time, Todd. But my thought would be that it probably to be a statutory change, that the regulatory change wouldn't be enough to really bind the counties to have this in their contracts as the one way of doing things.
Okay, I just heard Todd's name. Is this something, Todd, you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. It would have to be a statutory change, unfortunately. I don't think a regulation even would do the trick. They'd have to go the long way through legislation. So something to consider.
We'd need a bill draft request in now to do that.
Correct.
Could we make reimbursement on the hourly rate of what's shown for the time? Is that a possibility for those contracts that we say we'll reimburse at this rate per reported hour?
Yeah, that we might be able to do as a regulation. Because that's keeping the locus of control with us and not interfering with, third parties, which would require more robust statutory authority. I think we might be able to do that part through a regulation change.
Okay, so that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But I mean, I'm just concerned our monitors hung in with us, done a great job. And I totally agree that until the economic disincentive piece is addressed, we're not in compliance, in my opinion. So can we put that? I just keep pushing this stuff down the road. I'm sorry, but these are complicated issues, and I'm not hearing, I guess, because if we're going to do a regulation, we still have to go through LCB, don't we? And
Yeah.
I'm telling you, they're just crushed, they're crushed now working for the legislators and getting everything set up.
And Laura, there's 2 members. Kate had her hand up, Kate Thomas, and Franny has her hand up.
Okay, Kate? She probably gave up.
Thank you. I know it's all good. I was just going to suggest that I think hourly is a good call, but what we have learned, just seeing how differently people will have co-defendants, for example, and one comes in at $10,000, one comes in at $2,000, same work, same, so I would suggest capping it. So, and then anything above and beyond could be requested for exception if it's, complicated body cam, whatever, but caps have really, otherwise that hourly can get pretty out of hand for counties.
And I'll just note that the Davis consent is pretty clear that we can't have these kind of caps because they are those financial disincentives. But I think that's the one red flag that comes up with hourly billing is an attorney. I don't know of any right now, but could potentially inflate their billing to not accurately reflect the amount of work they're doing, or might overwork a case to receive more billing, hypothetically.
And
I think Franny still has her hand up.
Franny, whoops, do you have your hand up?
I do, and my dogs just started barking, I apologize. I want us to not forget that there's a Supreme Court order out there that abolishes flat fee contracts. And even if you look at the Douglas County letter, they consider their contracts flat fee. And although it sounds like Clark has so many exemptions that it may not be, in reality, a flat fee contract. I think many of these counties have flat fee contracts in violation of the Supreme Court order.
So, Professor Hanan, did you raise your hand or?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in, but I didn't want to cut this conversation short with something that I meant to say when I first spoke, which is that the other piece of this is, which I think I probably be characterized as harping on, is for the Nevada State Public Defender. That's another thing that, theoretically the state could do, is fund it better so that it can actually do what it's now required to do by statute, which is, step in whole or in part when counties opt in, or the sort of the teeth of the corrective action plan is that the state public defender will come in, if there's no complaints, if there's no data reporting, but there's no way for the Nevada State Public Defender to do that now. And I think Patty and Jim are working at least 2 full-time jobs. They're supposed to fill in as needed in White Pine, but they're often there. They have to go there all the time and appear remotely, in addition to in charge of appeals and in charge of the office. And but they don't have enough now, let alone if corrective action plans happen. So that's, I think, the other piece of this.
The state public defender, I don't know what needs to be done, but we've got to get them more money. Because A, they deserve more money for what they're doing right now, and B, should we need corrective action, it's a paper tiger, because we're all here because we want the indigent accused to get, really good, fair representation, right? So I don't know, but the state PD, it's a huge issue. And we can't get people to come into the satellite offices because there's not enough money. Then on the hourly, I still really think that, we have to weigh the idea of caps, Kate, with the economic disadvantage. I mean, it's just going to cost more to get lawyers in the rural counties than it does to get them in Clark County, even Nye County, because you have to get people to move out there or drive out there.
I have a question, this is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hi. Could we explore then, I think you need a statutory change. And then by regulation, you implement something like Susan was talking about, so that you carve out what types of payments. You reiterate the Supreme Court order that Franny mentioned, that flat fee. And if they're illegally doing it, then we need to deal with that part of it. And then through the regulatory process, because that's a little bit more flexible, you do your stair steps. In this case, you pay this. In this case, you pay this. What I don't know, and I don't know if this happens or not, is do you get to the point where, because you're reimbursing so much on hourly, that they never hire an attorney? And so you want to protect against that, because I'd rather have a real live person that's there, that's trained, that's consistent. So maybe that's the only potential downside. I don't know, because I'm not an attorney, so I'll just throw that out there.
So
to that end, I'm sorry, Patty, but is anybody done a study showing that because they're not paying enough to the state public defender and their county public defenders, they're paying much more in contracts? I mean, is that true, or is that just my sense? Or can we show them those numbers? Sorry, Patty.
I have no idea to answer that question. Just talking about the Nevada State Public Defender's Office, I have been advertising for a lawyer for Ely. I have had no applicants. the challenge is, all the counties are different, of course. There are counties that have no lawyers that live in them. And they're going to have to travel. Some of the DAs, that's a one elected office. You do not have to be a resident, besides Congress, I think, that you do not have to be a resident of the county, because there are counties without any lawyers, and the DAs travel there. Your public defenders, all the lawyers have to travel there, which is, if you're in private practice, that's a burden because you've got to charge for your time, travel to court or back at your regular hourly rate. So salaries are important, but I've had no applicants.
Yeah, but Patty, don't you think if you were offering $300,000 a year salary, somebody would apply?
Well, if somebody offered me that, I'd move to Ely.
I know. I mean, there's.
I could buy 3 houses. But you're not offering 300,000,
Yeah,
nor
but
will you be able to.
Okay, well, I don't know. I feel like this meeting, and I'm sure it's my fault, is getting like out of control.
Okay, no.
No, it's not you, Patty. It's just, I'm not, because I want to hear everything, but it's frustrating because there are these ongoing issues and an ongoing discussion. And it just seems to come down to money. The other piece, Professor Hanan, about that I saw in your report that you did raise is in terms of when you feel that we're in compliance, is the fact that we have to go hat in hand to IFC all the time. And is there a solution for that you see, Marcy? Because you're the one that has to go.
I think the solution to that would probably be in the next discussion of our budget build. I don't know if we want to just switch to that so we can tell you, this is the agency proposed budget build. This is not been approved in any way. It's just what we're submitting. But as the statute says, we need to share this with our board and get approval. So, I think the clear desire of the monitor is that this is built into our budget so that we don't have to go and request these items. But
so then can we move on now? Because can we move on now to 5? You want to take D first?
Yes. And this is going to be another Peter discussion. We also have Bud Milazzo with the governor's finance office. He is assisting us with many of these requests, and he's part of the reason that our communication is getting so much better. So we really appreciate having Buddy on our team. He's really helped us. That request we just had, I think it was just that increase in communication. So he is here today. Peter's going to do a short preview of what we're requesting. Would like to have the board's approval of our request with the ability to make changes as needed because the budget's not due yet. And we need to still make changes, but they are here to answer any questions. So Peter, would you take it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I discussed this a little bit before already. I'll try and keep it brief. We're asking for a few things, like I said, to have everything basically that we've asked IFC for to be put in our base budget the next biennium. I hope that's not controversial. It shouldn't be at this point. The IFC keeps asking us to have things included into our budget. In some cases, they've moved and instructed us to include it in our proposed budget. And I really, I had the chance, I'd really like to thank Daniel and ASD and Buddy and GFO. Like the last few months have been fantastic with really moving things along in ways that they weren't before. And both of them and their agencies have been really helpful in getting things done when we had a lot of problems running there for a little bit. In addition to the other things that should be going up in our base budget, that does include the amount in post-conviction account we're recommending a rate that's been paid over the last year rather than the average of the several last fiscal years. And that's in part because the rate of pay for these has gone up, as the board said it, to $172 an hour and may increase this coming January. So we're expecting those increased amounts to go to post-conviction attorneys to increase, and we should have the amount budgeted appropriately in the next biennium for those increases. One of the things we're requesting by way of BDR, you can see in the build, if you're a glutton for punishment, you can go line by line through the budget, though I can't say I recommend it as somebody who does. we are asking to develop like a, I think we're calling it it's not holistic, it's something else, but it's a total defense unit. So we'd be including post-conviction in the under the auspices of the department. So there'd be an office of a post-conviction solicitor that would handle those post-conviction habeas cases within that office as a state agency, rather than being farmed out to the various attorneys in the various portions of the state. And we think that'd be a cost-saving measure as well as a development issue for indigent defense, because we have this centralized kind of location. There's those efficiencies of institutions, increased knowledge bases of institutions, continuity of service, those kinds of things. And I think that we think that it really benefit both indigent defendants and really the state of law in the state going forward to have those consolidated in one place, where those are being actively pursued by professionals who are well trained in the area of post-conviction. And should that move through, that would probably considerably eat into that budget for post-conviction payments sent out to the individual post-conviction attorneys, as they wouldn't need to be appointed. Of course, we have a build out kind of setup, would take 2 years to really get the office fully developed. We'd be bringing in about half the office in the first year of the biennium. We anticipate start dates as in like October in the following year, and then the start of the rest of the positions the following July. So it'd be a slow build out, really to increase to really get that office started, to make sure everyone's set up, to smooth out any wrinkles, to really get the caseload building, and so they can better establish what they need before really taking on the full caseload for the state, which is, as you can guess by the amounts that we've paid just in the last several months, it's a significant amount of work taken on by a lot of attorneys right now. And this really centralizes that. The other, trying to think of the other major request is, I can't off the top of my head get, I don't have a tab 5 in my binder, so well, maybe I do, it's just way in the back. Chair's indulgence, if I might, for a moment.
I'm always indulgent. While you're looking for that, I just want to loop back. Marcy, did we need on number 4, there was no possible action that we needed to take?
No, I don't think there's
Okay,
possible action unless you'd like to direct us to do anything, but it sounds like we'll just come back at the next meeting with more.
Yeah, so the other items are, we want to add a position in the department to help with all of our fiscal requirements. That would be either an MA4 Management Analyst 4 or an ASO Administrative Services Officer 2, to really help lead and develop procedures to ensure that we're getting all of these fiscal things right? The board's talked about auditing. We don't have a huge staff. None of us are professional auditors. Having somebody who has better skills and abilities to read these reports, to really analyze the financial data, is really necessary to what it is we need to do going forward, to ensure that we're paying the right amounts to counties, to ensure we're paying the right amounts to attorneys, to ensure that we're not either losing money where it shouldn't be lost or paying money where it shouldn't be paid, those kinds of things. And that would go a long way to supporting that. Those are really the main changes. The others are things like asking for funding for various programs moving forward, trying to get justice text to, which is it's really an e-discovery tool, which does transcription of body-worn camera and audio for attorneys. And it's really smart kind of service where the information can be searched. The system provides kind of highlights in the video what might be useful to the defense attorneys utilizing or viewing that video. So in a DUI case, it can identify, when was the person pulled out of the vehicle, and it timestamps these things. Provides text of any conversation that can be overheard in the video. It can identify, well, this is where a horizontal gaze nystagmus test is being run, a walk-in turn test is being run, if those are things that are appearing in the video. So ideally, this would really reduce the amount of time that practitioners have to spend watching body-worn camera footage. some of the preliminary reporting from Justice Tech shows that based on some other studies, like a lot of attorneys spend from 6 to 10 hours a week reviewing body worn camera footage. Even cutting that in half would be a significant time savings for attorneys in the field. So we're really hopeful we get funding for that going forward, among all of the other things. If you have any questions about the budget, I'm happy to answer anything you have.
And Marcy, didn't you have another speaker that was going to talk about the budget?
Well, we have Bud Milazzo here who is available for any questions. He is with the governor's finance office, and he is really helping us through a lot of the issues that we have. So we've asked him to be here in case the board has questions. I did hear the Davis concern about whether this funding is going to be there going forward and that being a concern. So I think Buddy is aware of that, and I don't know if he has anything to speak to on that, but not to put you on the hot seat.
No, from my perspective, and I've just had the account not all that long. I've worked in the state a while, so I've seen the, continually public defender having to go to, the BOE and going to the legislature, which that's why the legislature, although, they say put in your budget, they made a change last biennium. It's not really ad hoc. They restricted money specifically for DITs. So in essence, it was budgeted, as opposed to previously, you were in essence asking for contingency funds that were not restricted, which is really an emergency pot. So I don't know the methodology. If last year the legislature thought, well, let's put it for a biennium into restricted, have them come back and ask for the money, which really isn't a process. It was not that difficult to process. I think there was a lot of communication errors and such, which is what delayed it. But from the normal process, it's not that difficult to do. It's our intention to approve putting it in the budget this year. And then again, it goes to the legislature. The legislature can decide, no, we want to make restricted contingency and have them come back and ask for the money all the time. It's certainly it's the legislature's discretion of what they want to do it. We are going to ask to try to have it in the budget, and that it's their final decision which way they go.
So their decision would impact Professor Hanan's report, right? She's nodding her head.
This is, you can call me Eve.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. So if it was denied and that resulted in one of the conditions of the judgment not being fulfilled for, a quarter or however long it took to figure something else out, then the state would be out of compliance with the consent judgment.
And from my perspective, not being a lawyer, okay. The legislature's perspective may be, we have it in restricted contingency, but also restricted contingency doesn't need to be requested as an emergency at the end. It can be requested with a proposal. Most times with the restricted contingency, what the legislature has said is, we're going to put this money aside for you because maybe we have questions on the program or how things are going. And when you want part of that pot of money, you need to make a justification to us to ask. So there shouldn't be a delay in, I would say, effectuating a program. There's notice and you go to the IOC to ask for the money. Whether that is, in violation of Davis, that's a legal opinion of, I always say this, 2 lawyers, you're going to get 3 opinions. That will be between LCB LCB legal and whomever, how they decide to, either fund the budget or not. But again, this money is restricted. No other agency can use it. If the money's not utilized at the end of FY25, reverts back to the general fund. So it was a better step of, at least acknowledging something, in my opinion, from, a start thing, it's acknowledging something is there It's making it restricted because they still had questions. If you watched last IFC, obviously they asked a lot of questions. Before IFC, when we submit to our program, Marcy replied to a lot of questions from LCB's fiscal staff about the program and how things were, what was being asked and what was being done. So, that's more of a restricted is to me, hopefully that was a step towards getting it in the budget. But it's possibly not. They could possibly say that, we always want to leave it restrictive. But again, the advantage is it is restricted. It's not emergency money they have to worry about another pot of money. It's something that is there, for the agency to request. And, the request shouldn't be, probably takes 2 months to get something on AFC agenda and approved, but it shouldn't be something where, your back's against the wall where you need money. It needs to be preparation. I have a lot of talks with, Marcy and Peter and Daniel Marlowe, his person is Don Carlson in the ASD fiscal. So we're in constant contact and talking about what is, is being requested. So I don't think the delays backwards are going to happen again, which was just a lack of communication, I think, on all sides. Not to point blame anywhere. It's not going to be the process going forward.
Laura, I see Franny has a question. I don't know if you can see that.
No, but good. Yeah, I see. I'm looking at Buddy. I'm not looking at Franny's little thing. Franny, you have a question? Before you start though, Franny, Buddy, I just am so grateful to you. And I know we all are. I've seen you work on our behalf. I've actually seen it happen. And a lot of the people on this call have not seen it, but
yeah,
if they had, they'd all be grateful. Okay, sorry, Franny.
That's okay.
No problem. I don't want to sound ominous here, but there's another player that has not been mentioned among all the other players who are messing around with this money, and that's the courts. And I just want you to know that the plaintiff's counsel in the Davis case are looking very carefully at what's going on and looking at the monitor's report and your responses. And while many steps have been taken, we know that. And a lot of stuff good things have happened, including the stuff that Buddy and Dids have been doing. But I think we would be remiss in representing our class clients and not telling you that at some point the court is going to have to get involved, and then the then the court, then the Supreme Court in particular, will have a big role in what anybody else does.
Yeah, and my little response would be the legislature and the governor, everyone is well aware of the Davis compliance. The legislature has its authority and they make decisions, and I'm sure based on knowing what the possible ramifications are. So, obviously you should ask what you should ask for, and they make their decisions. One thing I say with budget is you should always ask for what you want, and if someone wants to say no, let them say no. They have the authority to say no. If you watch enough IOCs, they say no to a lot of things, and they make it very explicit that they have the ability to say no. With that no possibly comes consequences. So if there was some possible liabilities from that, again, that's beyond our office, beyond the governor's office. Once it gets to the legislature, they make the decisions they make, and they take the responsibility for what decisions they make. So it's if they're willing to accept them to say a no and accept the possibility of what could happen, that's certainly within their purview.
Buddy, I think you're obviously your point's well taken, but we have never seen any indication from the IFC as it has been comprised and as we anticipate it'll be comprised, that with reasonable documentation, with the consequences and just what's the right thing, that the IFC would be saying no. I mean, you can never predict, and that's so important that you reminded us of that. But Franny, as to your issue, are you looking specifically when you say the courts, what issues are you thinking? And you acknowledged all the progress we've made. what issues are of most concern to you?
Laura, I'm not really ready to say that yet.
Okay.
I'm I just want to make, I guess I'm sort of the reminder here of some of the other stuff that's going on. And at the point that we're ready to say what particular issues we're going after. And it's not just the issue with Buddy and the IFC. It's really taking a look at the overall problems that you all have already discussed. And in some ways, the lawsuit may well help you in carrying out your work. I know that some counties have asked why they couldn't opt into the Davis lawsuit in order to be able to get.
Okay, one thing I want to note throughout this meeting, each one of us as a speaker, there's just a short period of absolutely no audible. I think everybody's probably recognized that unless it's just my computer. But anyhow, Franny, were you done?
I think we lost her, Laura.
Oh, okay.
She
All right.
disappeared.
Okay, now is
And,
there?
Laura, if I may,
Yeah,
one thing, I don't perceive that there's been an issue at all with the IFC, in the sense that they don't vote on it until they get it. So the things that have been presented to the IFC, I don't think have been denied. I think your bigger issue would be the legislature, what they approved during session. And if they, the IFC has no control over how much money gets restricted into an account for something. Right. That's done during session. So that's where you need to start. I think that the IFC meetings that Peter and Marcy have attended, they have very well presented, their reasoning for their requests. And there was a lot of questions back and forth, but I don't recall them denying anything that, the legislature had put into the contingency. So it's, just make a little differential saying, the IFC didn't approve it. The IFC hasn't rejected anything. It's the legislature the full legislature, which put that pot of money aside and said, you must come back to the IFC. And again, with good presentations, by Marcy and Peter, they've approved what was asked for. And unfortunately, that's the procedure that the full legislature set up in order for DIDS to get money.
Okay, and we can't change that? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yeah, the answer is you can't change it unless the legislature.
Well, that's what I mean, through a bill draft request.
Yeah.
And are you working on that, Marcy?
Be requesting it in the budget, or which specific part?
Seeing whatever it takes so you don't have to go because Buddy's saying, okay, it's the legislature, and you're absolutely right. And the IFC has never denied anything. But I see, just from a real distant perspective, that's a lot of work for Peter and Marcy to have to keep going to the IFC. It's something that Eve is concerned with because there is another layer of uncertainty. I mean, can't we just get an amount in our budget that's our money?
And I think, Chair, this is what Buddy was referring to, and Peter, about the base budget moving forward and how the law recently changed as to what our base budget is. And it's based on the second year of fiscal spending, which we don't necessarily know. We won't know our full spending until the legislature is actually already complete, because most counties don't hit the maximum until the third or fourth quarter. So we won't know how much money we need to reimburse them. So we are working with Buddy to ask for the appropriate amount, but I think it is still up in the air what our base is moving forward. Is that correct, Buddy? For the maximum contribution formula.
Well, yeah, a little bit for that too, but also it's not a bill draft request, Laura. You can't tell. They're not going to pass a bill that says we will fund everything you asked for. You just have to ask. The difference this time is, and again, I wasn't part of last budget, they put it in the side restricted account. This year, we're going to ask for them to put it in the budget. Still their decision whether they want to put it in a budget or put in restricted contingency, but that's nothing that a bill draft could cure, because again, they're not going to pass law that says they have to fund everything you ask for. I'm not sure historically, why they put in restricted. But again, I think it's a better step than the previous bienniums. You always had to go for unrestricted. That's more of a dogfight than restricted. Restricted acknowledges that there's budgeting that they want to do, but for whatever reason, they want more oversight before they're saying yes to transferring that money to the budget account. But they are acknowledging that, you know, something is there for you specifically. It would have been nice if they put the $6 million in the budget account for you each year. The only thing that would happen was, you know, you would get beat up during session when they'd want you to account for everything, as opposed to, you know, you go along to the couple IFCs and you answer the questions. Tremendous amount of work goes into Daniel's staff, you know, putting together a work program. And then, you know, me reviewing it and getting it over there. And then there's a lot of preparation and work for Peter and for Marcy to have to go over there and ask for that money. Unfortunately, that's the process that's out there right now. And I understand your point, but it's strictly up to the legislature whether they want to say no, put in your budget, or put it in restrictive. And restricted, we have absolutely no control over that.
This is Chris. Can I ask Buddy a question?
Of course.
Thank you. And thank you, Buddy, for your work and for working so closely with staff. I guess my question would be, to build the base budget, could they add, or you add, the 6 million that was allocated under restricted as your base, and then have some kind of correction that's made at the end in the second year, if that's how they're now doing budgets? It's changed since I was there. So I guess I'm just trying to think if we could use what's been allocated and what was given as the base budget and then build on there.
Unfortunately, you know, the way the state's process works is you have your base budget. If you want to increase your base budget, that's an enhancement, which they look at separately. You know,
Yeah.
So at least this time we're going to ask for the enhancement and try to put that into, you'll call it the base budget, but it's looked at separately as enhancement. They can put the enhancement into the base budget. They can take that same enhancement, the dollar value, and put it into a restricted contingency account. So, you know, we are going to ask for it to be in the base, but it would be as a standalone. Again, just state processes. It's a standalone unit, and they can say yes, no, put it here, put it there. Our goal is to try to get there because it makes on program and fiscal side, makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah,
Again,
absolutely.
there's a lot that goes into, you know, an IFC preparation and work programs, and, you know, a lot.
It's a wacky, I'm telling you, I haven't been there
Yes.
since 2006, and they haven't changed it since I first was on Ways and Means. It's unfortunate because
Yeah.
it's become so cumbersome. And I think
Right.
that's for a whole nother day. Thank you, though.
Laura?
My job is to try to help navigate the cumbersome, unfortunately, because the cumbersome is what it is. So I'm just trying to navigate it to where we can.
And
And
we're
much-
good
much-
hands, Buddy. I see Daniel has his hand up.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to clarify a statement. Marcy had mentioned Assembly Bill 346. With that change, it's the work program year authority or authorization, not the spend. And that all goes into the 2 times cap to maintain a stable level line budget. So it's the authority or authorization or appropriation that we have in fiscal year 25. That is the basis for our budget in the biennium. So it's no longer about what you spent. And that's, if you watch the hearing on AB 346, that's really the intent behind it, to remove incentives for spending whatever you can just because you can spend, and really save taxpayer dollars because your budget is not changed by what you actually spend.
So, and Laura,
Thank you. Thank you.
Daniel is helping by building the budget. So that big thank you to this movement forward is Buddy, as well as Daniel, Marlo, and Don. So I just wanted to make sure that that was pointed out.
And I
So
appreciate
these requests, these requests will exceed the 2 times cap, which the agency is not allowed to. this office supports, these enhancements to exceed the 2x cap to go forward in the budget to try to get them into a base budget. That's all we can do. Is I think previously it might have been didn't get past this office, or got hung up on the 2x cap we have every year. But this year this office will support, Amy Stevenson, our director. She is supporting asking for the additional money as part of a base budget.
Well,
And
that's
obviously as far as we can go.
That's
Yeah.
huge. We're so grateful for that. Now, is there any action that we need to take, Marcy? It's now 3:05.
Yes, so pursuant to NRS 180.320, a board is required to review and approve the budget of the department. Peter went over some of the items that we're requesting, and we have discussed them loosely. We are requesting that this board approve with our request with that ability to change as needed and as directed by, our department, the finance office or ASD. But we have to make that action. And once we submit the budget, it becomes confidential. So we're not able to discuss it until the governor releases it. So that's the action that we're asking you to take today.
Okay, is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I will make a motion to approve the budget based on the information that was submitted, the discussion that we had, and the recommendation of staff.
Thank you, Joni. Is there a second? Chris?
Does that include the ability to change as necessary by staff?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I'll amend my motion to add that.
And Chris second? You still second that, Chris?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Okay, and of course, the guy's now mowing my lawn, so I'm gonna mute myself. What else so that is passed. Anything else in number 5, Marcy, we need to deal with?
I will go through quickly. So county annual financial reporting for next year is in. The expected reimbursement for all of our rural communities would be around $8,623,251. So we have that information to be able to build into our future budget, and all of their budgets are provided to this board if there are any questions. We also have all of the quarterly reporting that we've provided to the board members. You can see that all the counties that have met their maximum have been reimbursed. Again, this year we reimbursed $5,964,469.95. So this is rolling forward, and we're seeing those positive changes. So if you have questions about what county is spending, it's in those quarterly reports, and we're happy to answer any questions if you have them. And finally, some positive changes for the state are that there's been a proposal to change the state administrative manual 2629. It's been unclear historically whether professional licensure and continuing professional education costs could be paid by the state, but they are taking steps to modify SAM 2629 to allow our department or offices to reimburse for those attorney fees, which is already done at the county level, and prosecutors are having their attorney fees reimbursed. So this brings parity if this is passed. And then it'll also allows for up to $250 in continuing legal education costs to be paid and budgeted for each department. So I don't know if this is something that's necessary or that the board would like to submit, but we've done a proposed letter in support of these changes, pointing out that it brings about pay parity and will further help us be able to staff the state public defender's office because it makes us more competitive. So that is coming up at the next BOE, which I believe is in October now. And I didn't know if this board would like to do a letter in support, or we just wanted to make you aware that it was going to be scheduled.
I think we would definitely like to do a letter in support. I think
Yep.
it's important.
Marcy, do you think that would be appropriate and helpful to us?
I think that public comment is always welcome at Board of Examiners meetings. So we've prepared a letter in support for Laura's signature that we've submitted.
Ooh.
So I don't know if Laura, if you've had an opportunity to look at it, but it just basically writes out that the board is writing in support of the proposed changes to allow for reimbursement. The goals of the department are to build a strong and resilient statewide network of effective indigent defense providers and to support them with regular education, training, and other defense-specific resources. These changes will further assist the department in their goal of building an effective team of indigent defense providers within the department. And further, the changes will provide pay parity between our county prosecutors and our state indigent defense providers as required by NAC 180, Section 39, since most counties already cover professional licensing costs for county prosecutors. So the Board on Indigent Defense supports these changes to build a stronger Nevada. So that's been the proposed letter. I don't know if there's changes that you would like to make to it, but we can get that done for the chair's signature with the support of this board.
Madam Chair, this is Chris. I would suggest that the board support the letter and direct that the chair sign it. I think it shows that staff isn't just acting on their own and they do have support from the board,
Yeah.
so it helps.
Yeah. Chris, I'll second your motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Marcy, I think I just got busted. I think I've been good about looking at my emails from you, but I did not see that. I'd be happy to sign it as directed by the board.
And then finally, moving to item 6, which is the training. Oh, unless you want to do you need to take a vote on that, Laura? You had a first and a second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, so now I would ask if we could turn this over to Brenda for a quick review of where we are with the training and pipeline.
Thank you. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Chair. We have a LASSO event coming up in October at Boyd with Professor Stephen Wright. And we are hoping to get some attorneys there that might be able to recruit some students to come out and intern that or extern with them in either spring, summer, or next fall. The annual conference, we got budget approval to work with NPHF again as a conference manager, and that seemed to work really well last year. So we're looking forward to working with them again. We're looking to have it in Reno, probably in April. We're trying to pin down dates right now between when they're available, our availability, and venue availability. And then finally, we have several different CLEs planned for the remainder of the year. Randy Fiedler and I think was on this call, and Stacy Newman are presenting one next month on managing effective defense of the challenging client. John Lambros has agreed to provide an ethics class, as has David Westbrook. Christine Kuzemka has agreed to provide a mental health CLE. And the Court of Appeals judges, I'm trying to pin them down on a date when they can basically reiterate what they did at the bar conference, which most indigent defense providers weren't able to attend, talking about their cases and changes to the NRAP. So those are the upcoming ones that we have tentatively identified.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions on Brenda's information? Okay. And then is that it? We're just going to go into upcoming meetings?
Yes, we're going to go into upcoming meetings. Regarding the first meeting, which is scheduled to November, I heard the monitor say that her report was going to be done on November 15th. So I would propose that we move our November 7th meeting to a new date. And I don't know if we did receive feedback that the board would like to have more time to review the monitor's report before we have a meeting. So
Marcy, all reports, and I realize that it is not the fault of staff that we get them so late, but I like to read and study everything in the backup, and I find that when I get things 24 hours before the meeting that are 177 pages long, I just don't have the time to get through everything, and I just want to make it clear that's not your fault. You get things when you get them.
Can we have that meeting on December 12th? Does that work? Does that give you enough time, Joni, and gives us all enough time?
Well, don't worry about me. I would like to know if everybody else feels the same way, that we get a lot of backup a short time before sometimes we get a lot of backup a short time before the meeting, and I personally don't think there's enough time to go through it.
If the report's not done till the 15th, do we need to meet after that?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I was looking at the dates after that. And
the only thing I'd point out is December 12th is interim finance.
okay.
I don't know if we'll be scheduled for interim finance, but
Okay, because if we look at our Thursdays, the 14th is maybe too soon. Right? I mean, because Eve's report's on the 15th, right?
correct.
So then the next Thursday is Thanksgiving, right? Or not?
No, the 28th and 29th.
28th, it's late this year.
Okay, all right.
So that we could,
21st?
21st should work.
Everybody happy with the 21st?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay, so then we're gonna move the November 7th meeting, is that Franny's dog, to the 21st?
Yes.
Tracy.
Do we need a motion and a second on that?
Todd, do we need a motion to move the date?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Good. So we just done that and everybody's
No, that
happy.
can be done at the chair's discretion.
Okay. At my discretion, we're moving it to the 21st. Okay, and
You have good discretion.
the other dates for now are standing February and June. And then number 8, public comment.
I haven't received anything on our end.
Okay, anybody on the line? Anybody want to call in or on the Zoom call? Okay, so now is there a motion to, this has been I don't know, it seems like it's been a tough meeting. Good meeting, but tough meeting. Is there a
No,
motion?
it was good.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a
Second.
Thank you.
Third.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are done.
You did a good job, Laura. Good job.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.